So welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for March 13th, 2024. We'll follow our standard approach pretty much of looking at what was on the agenda in issue number 1516. Before we get started, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share?
The Collaborator Summit is on in the first week of April. The 3rd and 4th of April, I think. Let me check, be sure. I am very bad at dates. So if you are a collaborator or a friend of a collaborator, essentially somebody that has reasons to be there, please reach out if you need to know more, about how to join and so on and so forth. So, and see you there.
Sounds great. Joins. Okay. Any other announcements people would like to share? If not, that takes us to the CPC and board meeting updates. Matteo, anything you'd like to share on that front?
And yeah.
Okay. So no updates. Okay, so last week we did agree, I think, that we would focus pretty much all of this meeting's time on the issues all related to number 51951, which is, basically enable yarn and PM for binaries by default. I think I asked before we went on the air, nobody mentioned any other issues which we really have to cover. So at this point, let's dive into that issue. And I think what we want to try and do with this time, we have about 40 minutes. We really want to figure out some concrete sort of next steps to closing on the discussion. I know there's been a lot of different threads of discussion, and there's some strong sort of feelings on all sorts of different aspects. So the better we can sort of contain it down to, like, here's some concrete next steps that will help resolve or resolve some things, or agree that we're not going to resolve them or whatever. Like, when we're having the discussion, if we can try and move it towards, here's what we can do to help sort of get the discussion moving in a direction that we think is most healthy, most productive for the project itself. So I'll let Roy put his hand up, so I'll let him start.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. You let me know, my voice is kind of terrible. Let me know if you can not understand me. But basically, yeah, I wanted to start because the point I kind of had, and the reason I left the review in that PR is because I think, like, this whole conversation is suffering from not having a design doc, like, guiding the entire development of the project, right, the core pack. So now we're kind of stuck at this space where, like, well, multiple collaborators disagree on, like, whether the goal is achieved with the experiment or not, or whether we should pursue or not. And there's no guiding document, right? So my request in that PR, the reason why I left that review is I was asking, at the very least, that the alternatives considered, right? So that in a technical discussion, we can also look at possible alternatives that were considered. But what I would really love to see is a more full-fledged design doc so that discussion can remain more technical, because the place this all started from was a very emotional discussion, lots of tension, and, like, I would really love to see, like, us convert into a more technical discussion instead of all this back and forth we had. So that's very actionable. That's kind of like what I requested, and yeah, I wanted to start with that. We can. I think Jeff is next.
Okay. Yeah, Jeffrey's next up.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I opened 2 PRs so I agree with all that. I also think that, like, we're here because we haven't made decisions. Like, we haven't decided whether or not we want to be trying to remove npm. We haven't decided whether or not we want to ship other executables, and if so, what they should do, what our policy should be for who gets that treatment, etc. So I opened, among other decisions, I opened 2 PRs to just kind of put down in words, like, potential policies, which are really just like, well, if this PR lands, that's us making the decision that this is how we want to be. Like, are we trying to remove npm or not, for example? So in addition to the design doc for core pack, which I think is a great idea, I think like for the 2 PRs I've opened, the one about executables, for example, the current draft of it basically says we're not going to ship executables for things that aren't vendored in the distribution. So there wouldn't be a yarn executable, there wouldn't be a PMPM executable. If that's what we decide on, like if the current draft is what lands, then that ends the debate. Like there's no enabling core pack because it would be in violation of this policy. So like we could make decisions to try to narrow our options, and then that could be the way that we kind of come to an agreement. I would start with the 2 PRs that are already open, to see if maybe we have consensus or near consensus on those, because then that significantly reduces what we have to debate.
I just put up my hand because I just wanted us, and maybe I'm reading into this more than I should be, but like I could see the position that some people are like, all this is sort of like we've got a PR, we should decide to land the PR or not, and everything else is just kind of getting in the way of that. So I think one of the questions that maybe we can talk about and see if we have consensus or not is like, do we need to do all of that? Do we need to have a plan in place? Do we need to have more design documents? Do we need to answer all these questions in advance of landing that particular PR? And I think that's worth having like a discussion and trying to see if we at least have consensus on that bit first, because I do see some, I think, disagreements, and I'll hand it over to Antoine, whose hand is up.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should consider whether or not it's reasonable to ask for. We are not going to ask for every PRs to have a detailed plan on how it's going to be implemented, etc. And on the subject at hand, well, it's been a while since it was suggested in the TSC meeting that that what should happen, and nothing happened. So yeah, I guess to your point, Michael, should we maybe consider moving forward, because otherwise we are just stalling. That's all.
Matteo had his hand up next.
My like something that might be easier, it's a very binary yes and no question, and I think we have a quorum here. It's should the node project aim to remove npm? Okay, because it's a simple yes and no decision. Okay, and we can clarify this, okay, in a quick enough way. Yes, there is a PR open. Thank you, Geoffrey. But I think, like, in order to move things forward, I think that is the most that's the most important clarifying question that we need to specify. Okay, and then from there on, like, this is actionable. It clarifies us a very simple next step. Okay, and then we can decide on everything, every other solution. I'm done.
I just wanted to get that PR. Jeffrey, can you paste the link to the PR so I can add it to the minutes?
Sure, I can stop sharing if you want. I just
Yeah, I think if you could do that and then just paste it in the chat, that would be good. I see Antoine's hand, Roy's hand was up next.
Yeah, no. So yeah, I would just like to reiterate, like, in my thinking, like, right now I added last minute to the agenda a different PR to remove core back from core. So given that the conversation has become, that there's two extremes here, there's enabling the binary jumper by default, right? Like, and there is removing core back altogether from core at the table now. And that's the reason why I think this all is happening, because of the lack of the, a guiding technical document to guide a discussion, right? Like, and it's a very charged one. And I think I agree with Matteo that we should probably answer that first question. Do we even aim to remove NPM, like, as a first step? So the reason why I don't want to that I think should be blocking for that PR like is because there's a lot of conversation happening around core pack. It's not about just that PR landing and enabling it by default or not. There's a lot more conversations happening. So that's why I would like to see a technical document guiding the discussion.
Right. So Antoine had his hand up next.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a PR for removing core pack, but there's no PR for removing NPM. So I'm not sure how it would help us, because no one is suggesting for real at least to remove NPM, and I'm not sure that's what's blocking progress. Would be my point, because sure it creates a lot of drama, but also I don't see that's the reason folks are, for example, blocking the PRI open to enable Copac. At least the reasons that were given, none were are we going to remove NPM?
There's no. So I think so. I had my hand up, so I'll go in. I think to add to that, I think it would be useful to actually just go through our consensus process. I don't think we want to have a vote. We don't even need to have to make this controversial. If we can, but if there is like that agreement that is like we have no intention to remove NPM, right? Like that can just be one of the fundamental pieces of things which we base future discussion on. The question would be like, would anybody here object to that? Right. And we can make sure that we give the rest of the TSC an opportunity to object to that. But like, I think, we could at least say like, do we already have agreement on that? Great. We've answered one of the questions, right?
Can I just point out, Yagiz did put a block on that PR. He's the only objector
Okay.
to it. And I just pinged him to see if he could join.
Okay. Okay. So is anybody else here, would say, hey, I have an objection to that, like that we would document through that PR. So where do you have the link to that PR, Jeffrey?
Yeah.
Would anybody else here like say no, we're not in agreement with that. We should discuss that some more before, we think we have consensus on that. Okay. So that's good. We'll make sure that Yagiz and other TSC members have an opportunity to comment in on that, but we can at least say from we've got quite a few TSC members here. We have 13, I think. No objections from 13 TSC members in call, and then we can, close with the rest of it. Matteo had his hand up next.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that Yagit has an objection. So yeah, it's more or less it needs to, we need to call it in this way. Like in
Okay. So we can have a discussion, we can follow on some discussion with him since he hasn't been able to make it, right?
But
Antoine, you had your hand up next?
Yep. Yeah, just wanted to clarify that that us TSC members don't have the intention of removing NPM is one thing, but it's up to collaborators really whether something lands in Node. But I guess what we could say is it's unlikely to happen without NPM team support and a good replacement, I guess.
Yeah, all I'm writing down is like there's no objections from the 13 TSC members. That doesn't mean that there won't be another objection, but like at least that's a starting point. And there is that PR, which like if we think that if that lands, then like you said, that'll follow our regular processes to decide whether it can land or not. I think, that I'm sort of maintaining a list of possible questions at the bottom of the discussion. I think the other one we talked about is, should the existing PR be blocked on the asks for, more design plans, plans, discussion. I don't know how to, if people have a better suggestion for that, but like, I think that's another fundamental thing that we're getting to the point of where there's some, I feel like some people are, we should just land this. Others are like, hey, we need more information. We need to think through some more aspects. So that seems like a question that we could try and work to see if we have consensus, or, if we don't, how do we move forward? Jeffrey has his hand up.
I would suggest that we talk about the executable question next, because
Okay.
like if say we land the executable right now, no one's blocked the executable PR and no one suggested an alternative, and it's been open for over a week. So if we agree with what I wrote there as a policy, then we don't need to debate core pack design. Like that'll settle the open PR that Antoine opened about enabling core pack by default. The answer would just be no, we're not going to enable core pack default by default. Then the following question would be whether to keep core pack or not. That's where the design doc matters and so on. But let's just take things in sequence. Like, do we want executables? Yes or no? If the answer to that is no, then we don't need to, tie anything else into that question. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. So maybe you can frame that question for, in case people haven't looked at that specific one. And
Sure. So I opened this PR. I wasn't sure. When I first wrote it, I wasn't really sure what it should say, what I thought if it was going to be a majority or consensus policy. But it's only one sentence. We're going to bundle
Could it be-
executables whose names refer to software that is vendored within the node distribution. So, we have a node binary, we have an npm binary, npx binary, or executable, I guess I should say. We have a core pack executable because that is vendored within the node distribution. We don't currently have a yarn executable or a pnpm executable. That's what Antoine's PR of enabling core pack would create. Those executables would be different from the other ones I just mentioned because they don't refer to anything that's vendored within. They point at a symlink, they're symlink to core pack, but the name of it is yarn. Yarn is not included in our distribution. It's going to get downloaded by you running this thing. So if this like PR lands, that means core pack can't be enabled. The other PR that I suggested as the alternative to enabling core pack by default would also not be able to land. I initially wasn't sure about this, but the more I thought about it, the more I think this is the right approach as a policy, just because this gets us out of the business of dealing with all the politics of other projects. And when they ship some of our major changes or breaking changes, or they decide like PMPM, say in the future decides, oh, actually we want the PMPM executable to point to our installer, not to core pack, or some other project comes and says, hey, we want, our installer added to your thing, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think we just don't want that headache. And if we're keeping NPM, then people already have a very easy way to install anything. We don't need to provide them these little scripts essentially that save them the trouble of running a single command. So
can you paste the link to that issue, that PR so I can put it in the minutes?
sure. Do you want me to stop? I can stop sharing too if you want.
Yeah, I think the wording could maybe use some tweaking, but I think it's like, yes, under that you could argue that by vendoring core pack, you could, like, what's actually being vendored in is not yarn and PNPM, but core pack, right? I think I think it's like, we will not install links to things which aren't vendored in or something like that.
Right. We're not going to be in the business of like cheap PC manufacturers that let companies install shareware on their machines to try to, here's Adobe Photoshop Elements as a trial to get you to try to buy Photoshop after you've bought the cheap Windows laptop, blah, blah, blah. Like, I just don't think that's a business that we should be in. Like, people can download stuff. They know how to install things. Let's just stay out of all like, this is a politics headache that we don't want. I think we've got enough on our plates.
So it's almost
So
like,
I don't.
so go ahead, Antoine.
I don't. So if that PR lands with rewarded wording, wouldn't my PR just update this text to say add core pack binaries? Like, it's not because like this PR is documenting the current situation. That doesn't mean that
It's
not going to change.
sure, but it's meant to make a decision. Like if we decide to land this PR, the decision we're making is that we're not going to land the other one.
So if you look on my PR, you can see that there are several folks who approve it. So it seems that many folks think it should not be the policy.
I mean, no one's approved or blocked this PR. It's just been sitting there, which makes me also feel like this is a headache that no one wants. If no one wants to engage with this topic, then maybe we should just not get into this business of, you know, shipping little placeholders for other projects.
I think
Maybe no one
sorry,
feels strongly.
I'm going to take 1 second just to say I don't think we could quite read that into until we make the, like, if we decide this is one of the answers that needs to be resolved before this PR can land, I think that might motivate more people getting involved into the discussion, right? Like, so I don't think we can take lack of people getting in as a decision one way or the other, or like even input one way or the other. Matteo, go ahead.
So there are two things in I think for me personally, the guiding principle or the fact that a node distribution includes or not include an executable is not necessarily important. What is important is that I have reproducible builds. Okay. So as long as I have reproducible builds, to be honest, if the code is downloaded, comes from, it's a plugin that you need to download and so on and so forth to make it work, that's not a big problem. Okay. If I don't have reproducible builds, then yeah, then I would say it's a big no. Okay, so this is for me the distinction on this. It's not about not shipping anything that downloads external software is a solution to reproducible builds, but there are others. So you know, we do this kind of thing already somewhere. So if you know, if you notice, whenever you install a package from npm that has a binary add-on, we download the headers files. Okay, why are we not shipping the header files inside the binary? Okay, we are downloading the headers file. Okay, the headers files though are part of our distribution. Okay, and they are shipped the exact header files that are being downloaded, referred to correctly from our website. So it's but the system works because it's reproducible. So
yeah, I guess I was trying to ask like how you think that comment affects this particular discussion. In that, like, do you think Carpac as it currently stands helps or hinders the reproducible side of things?
the latest I've opened an issue that was resolved. So like I think it's fixable. Okay, like a tool can be done to produce reproducible builds for users. Okay, so currently the latest version that was released not so long ago, 2 days ago, has fixed this from my point of view. So it's still reproducible. Okay.
Right.
Now we can say that we have no business in including other binaries in it, which is a completely perfect stand. Okay, but it's like I care more about having reproducible software than if a script is
okay. But it sounds like that's a irrelevant point. If it's like if you can or can't get you know, if it's already a solved problem, then it's not it doesn't matter for this point.
Well, but there can be other cases. So again, especially for npm, for like it's important to be clear that it needs to be reproducible builds. Okay, if there are no reproducible builds, then it's really bad. So it's it's a tricky. It's sold for Corpac, is not sold generically. So
But I think, sorry, go
for
ahead.
Corpac, we could solve this. Okay. For example, do we want to include a TSC jumper? Probably not. Okay. Unless we have something like the TSC, a TSC Corpac equivalent in there, or Corpac can handle TSC as well. Okay. Somehow, somewhat.
So I think we could treat it as like it's a principle we should consider in the discussion, but it doesn't seem like it's today. It's really related to the Corpac specific thing, right? Like maybe in the wording of if our wording that says we will include binaries, it could include something like, but it must not degrade reproducibility or something like that. Would that cover your concern, Matteo?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Roy, you have your hand up?
Yeah. I was just going to counterpoint to Matteo here, but like if you want reproducibility, right? Like you know, adding network, file IO, interaction, right? Like that's all going to get in the way, right? Like in its essence, in its essence, right? Like it's kind of not helping reproducibility, right? Like at its core, but at the same time, a good idea. Like maybe we should, if you really think strongly about reproducible builds, like maybe add that to the policy so that kind of we can document it and see if that's kind of a core, like value that the project like always want to pursue, right? Like so, like other people can also chime in, right?
I just wanted to add in, I think, like looking at the binaries, there's quite a bit of, from the discussion, there's quite a few different aspects. I think one of the fundamental things that might be like, is there any way that we would include yarn PNPM binaries in Node itself? Right? Like, because that's, it's not whether we'll, because that might be a natural question if we said we're only going to include things that are vendored. Like maybe the question then comes back to like, is there consensus that we would not include those, or that some people would advocate that we should include those if that was the policy? Antoine has his hand up next.
Yeah, so the TSC settled that question 3 years ago.
Okay.
4 years ago, so well, a while back, when we had a vote deciding do we want to include a yarn binary through Corpac as NPM or not include it at all. And Corpac was the result of the vote.
Okay. And as long as people are willing to let that stand, then I think that answers the question, right?
Yeah. I guess we could retake that vote until then.
If we are willing, if the maintainers are willing to take on another monstrous project like yarn and PNPM in the binary, in the repo, yeah, we could possibly do that. But this is this is
like that's my take too, right? But I was just, we're trying to build up our fundamental things we've already got consensus in.
Yeah, exactly. But it's good if you express that no is not a priority. Okay, let's express it again. Right. So
yeah, so we basically said, like, unless somebody brings that up, like a basic assumption is we're not going to include those binaries in. We'll work on like, yeah, we're not, reach consensus documenting, we're not going to remove NPM. So then that goes back to like, okay, what Corpac was doing. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, if we ever get to the position where whether it's jumper binaries or, vendoring, well, it sounds like we wouldn't be vendoring, but if we ever get to the state where you download Node and you're suddenly presented with a choice of, package managers, I must then, if we're going to provide that choice because because of what we're including with the distributions, then we need to be able to explain in documentation, if you're a user, what should you be using? At the moment, you use NPM because that's what we give you, and there is this experimental thing if you're interested in looking at it. But if we suddenly, end up with a situation where we have a yarn binary or a PNPM binary in addition to NPM, then it's almost on us as a project as a whole to be able to explain to the users why you would pick one of those over the others. I mean, it's essentially introducing more confusion into the, how do I get started with Node?
I see Jeffrey has his hand up next.
Yeah, for me, it boils down to like the question about like, do we want to deal with vendoring in the Yarn and PNPM? It's like sure, it saves Yarn and PNPM users needing to run one command, but it adds like all this extra work on us, whether it's vendoring these things or the binaries or core pack or making sure that the executables are what these various projects want. And I just don't think we want that burden. Like, and it's not a good UX to like ship multiple ways to use multiple package managers and so on. Like that's just adds confusion for users. We're like, for these, advanced users that know they want to use PNPM, okay, it saves them having to run one command. But they're already advanced users that know what they want and know how to run that command. For the novice users that are just want to get started and want to use the same tutorials that have been on the web for 13 years, like I don't think we should be adding this complication on them or this burden on us. Like I think it's just not worth it.
I think that leads in actually to what I put my hand up for. Is I think one of the key questions is what kind of level of responsibility and overhead do we take on by including a jumper, whether it's a binary or whatever. Like, clearly if we package, we take the burden on of like CV fixes and stuff, and we've seen with NPM that is part of our maintenance burden, and one of the reasons that I think we don't want to do it for the others. But I think a key thing to try and see if we have a common agreement consensus is like, what level of responsibility do we take if we have something through a jumper? We could take the position that like, and we updated the threat model to say, yeah, we don't take any responsibility. So like, yeah, it's here, but really use at your own risk. And if something goes wrong, like we're not going to update it to give you a new version. It's totally up to you, right? But my sense is like part of the discussion is based on people may not be 100% comfortable with that. So seeing whether that's like, yeah, no, we're comfortable that like, no, we take no responsibility, so the overhead should be 0 is going to work. Or if we don't really believe that, then it's an important part that says, yeah, if we do this, we're taking on X, Y, and Z, and this is what we're going to have to do. So I don't know what people's thoughts are on that side of things. Like maybe I'll ask a very direct question. Is anybody here sort of not in consensus with the fact that we can state it in terms of we take no responsibility? We've included this as a convenience, but we're not taking on any additional maintenance burden by doing this. Richard's got his hand up.
I doubt it'll be very effective. I think we'll still end up with a lot of noise with people saying, we've got this, we've scanned it, and somehow we've got a security scanner that's thrown up that you're somehow including or not including some vulnerable version of something. We get that for things already in NPM. Okay, we do take that maintenance on board and do update that. But I think shipping something deliberately, then like trying to sort of wash our hands of it, well, then why should we include it in the first place? It just seems a weird message to be sending out that we're going to include something, but we don't want to be responsible for it.
Roy has his hand up next.
Yeah, I think related to that, like I think it's a big ask to assume the maintenance of core pack moving forward, like, and up to now, like the Yarn folks have been very engaged, right? Like, and it's one of the concerns that were brought up in that PR to enable, right? Like that core pack in its essence, like benefits way more Yarn by solving the whole different package namespace in the registry. than PNPM. PNPM has been very passive in this conversation. They're just like, oh, fine, different way to distribute. Like, let's get the hands of the user is fine. So that's what I really insist. Like having a technical document, like that we can anchor the conversation to, right, helps disperse all these noise, right? Like, okay, like these are decisions that were made that make technical sense, right? Like, and we're not only being, oh, these are like this serves the Yarn project, like it's adding a bunch of burden to the node project. We don't need to get in there if we stick into a technical conversation instead, right? So yeah, that's why I really insist that I think it's an important point in time to have that. Jack, go ahead.
I just want to add briefly, I can link to this, but I reached out to the PMPM team to just try to get a sense of what they wanted. And they basically wrote back, what choice do we have? We have to say yes, or else the Yarn team will be annoyed with us. And I pushed him a little harder, and then Zoltan opened some polls on Twitter. One poll asking if his users prefer to install PMPM through Corpac or through the standalone script, and 2/3 said the standalone script. Another poll said, would you rather, if PMPM comes through Node, should it be a locked version the way NPM is, or through Corpac? And for that one, 2/3 said Corpac. So I don't know what you make of that. But yeah, I mean, like, I think their feeling is they want to do whatever their users want. But this wasn't their project, and they feel like they want to support it the way they support 15 other installation methods. But it's very much a Yarn driven thing, or a Yarn and Node driven thing at this point.
So it'd be fair to say that, the take is that PNPM is not nearly as I don't know what you would say, like engaged or in like
he also
going one
said
way or
he
the
wants
other.
he also said he wants to stay out of it because it's too heated.
Okay.
And obviously NPM wants to stay even farther out of it. So that's kind of what I was getting at. Is like, do we want this headache?
No, I'm not sure that's quite accurate, because NPM wants to not be included via Corpac, but they really are participating to the conversation, while Zoltan asks to not participate to the discussion throughout it. But PNPM is very much an actor within Corpac.
It is an actor, but not an active. Sorry, not in the active development.
So I think we only have 5 minutes left. So it'd be good to loop back to I don't know exactly how this helps us sort of close the discussion.
If we could make a decision on the second PR that I opened, that would at least answer the question of whether Antoine's PR can land. That's what I'm trying to push towards that one. I don't know if anyone else has a suggestion of how to wrap things up.
So that your suggestion would be like in our possible question clarifies, I added the will Node.js install links that enable binary scripts, etc., outside of Node.js. And did you paste the PR for that
Yeah,
in?
I can paste it again.
So,
I mean, no one's argued for an alternative. So I don't know what to make of it. Like, if this is what we want to do, then we've made the decision, and we at least have decided the question that we're not enabling Corpac. Then we could later tackle if we want to keep Corpac or not.
Like if your PR means mine can't land, well, of course I object to it. But
okay, well then object onto the PR. But you didn't object on the PR.
It documents the current situation. But I don't think that should mean that my PR couldn't land.
Well, I think it depends on the wording. So I think some work could be done on the wording, but like if we document somewhere that it says like the way I might put it is like, will Node.js install links that enable binary scripts, etc., outside of Node.js? Like, are we gonna do that or not? Like, this is clearly we're somehow enabling binaries which are not shipped with us, right? Like whether they're bundled or not bundled really doesn't matter. It's like, are we enabling anything? So
yeah, I can improve the wording in the PR, but the question is like, you know what I'm intending.
Yeah.
Is this what we want, or does someone want to argue for the case, Antoine, for example, that no, we should have a Yarn executable that installs Yarn when you run it, or downloads and installs Yarn when you run it?
Mateo has his hand up, and we really got 3 minutes.
My take is that as long as the binary, as long as the build or the environment is reproducible, it doesn't matter. So this is my take. Okay. If it's not reproducible, then we have a big problem. Okay. But if it is reproducible, no big deal.
I would
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's actually reproducible necessarily, because then that raises the question of what these binaries point to over the long term. Like right now, the yarn
I think,
enabling
sorry,
core pack yarn points to yarn 1.
I'm
When
gonna
we
jump
change
in
that to
because
yarn 4, that's a breaking change, blah blah blah.
I'm trying to jump in because we really only have 2 minutes till we want to go to the private section. I think there's actually a lot of aspects on that one. So I think what I can see is a very tangible thing is we've got these 3 questions, and I think that one that you've got there is the one to push on, right? So maybe that, let's get the discussion that says abstract of core pack. Are we going to make a policy that says we will or won't do this? And we all get involved in that discussion. Mateo, your points of like, this is the thing that matters to me. I think there's things that will matter to other people. And, that seems like the right thing to work out. And then, because I think anyway, that's my suggestion.
If I could just add one more thing, this PR also doesn't mean we remove core pack. It just means we can't enable it. So then that it just leaves for another day the question of whether
Right.
we keep core pack or not. Like, is it worth keeping if it's not enabled? I don't know. But like, we don't have to settle that question as part of this.
Correct. So that takes us to our minutes. Does that sound like everybody, a good next step is to really have that discussion as whether we, because, for example, some of the things Richard said about like we're taking on extra maintenance burden. I think we can have those discussions in there and get to the point of like, are we willing to do that or not? And go through those things. Seems like a good next step to me. Everybody, any objections, alternate suggestions?
I think last week, Miles said that maybe we should also decide if core pack might be enabled in Node 22 or not, because I think the cutoff date is coming close, and maybe I don't know, maybe we could also try to decide that.
Well, I think we have to decide that if we're going to enable executables first before because then we have to decide that yes, we want executables in order to decide that we want to enable core pack.
I think like that third question of should the existing PR be blocked on the ask for more design plans discussion, that maybe asks this directly, right? Like maybe that's something we need to see if we can get consensus on. It's either like it can just land, in which case it can make it into 22, or we want more discussion, in which case I think that answer is no, right? Like,
okay, yeah. So I guess could open a vote for that. That would be the process.
No, it can't land without settling the question about the executables. That's the whole thing. You're just
sorry, Jeffrey, that's your position. Other people might have a different position, and that's where we might have to have a vote, right? Like, it's can we get to consensus on whether it should be blocked or not? If not, then we may need a vote.
Well, it's the same question. That's all the PR does is create the executables.
I think without having a lot of these a lot of these questions answered, it's it's a vote in the dark. We don't really know. Like a lot of the TSC will not really fully understand the picture.
Right, and that totally fits into my view of things. But like, if 2/3, if whatever, if enough TSC members say no, this can land on its own. Like that's how we end up. Like if we fundamentally don't have agreement, that's. And maybe like it could be forced by Antoine could move for a vote onto whether it can land or not. And that's really answering that question. Is it blocked on this or not? Right. And I think under our governance, that's fair. And then, people who might not object to it actually landing at some point can still say there's not enough information. So I object to landing now. Right. And that's perfectly fair too, I think. Does that make sense? So maybe on like, again, not everybody's here, but like if we think that like that should be and needs to be answered like sooner than later, that's one of the three things is like that we should close on is like, are we going to effectively be blocking this? Which if we say you got to wait, we are, right, or not?
Well, that PR has other objections besides the executable question. So that's just one of several objections.
It
And
can,
my
yeah, go ahead.
my objection, to be very transparent here, I'm doing that objection like also like on behalf of other collaborators and non-collaborators of the project who have expressed divergent opinions of Carpac from the beginning. So I am objecting on the at the end of the day, I'm only asking for a design doc to guide the conversation. But yeah, it is a sentiment that not only mine.
Sorry, I have to drop.
Yeah, okay. I think we have to move off to the private section, but I think those three questions will help us navigate some of these, and like maybe I'll talk to Antoine about that third one and see what the next step is in terms of that one. So thanks for everybody who's been listening into the on the live stream. Before we go to the private session, also, good to have this, a good conversation here. And this is part of our process. We want to have everybody's views and get through a discussion. So like the fact that we're discussing all these things is not a bad thing, just part of our regular process. For anybody who's watching.